There I am, offline for the Jewish holiday for 48 hours. I come back on, what I miss. I'm like Johnny Five in Short Circuit going, need input. And I go on social media, and the first thing I see is a whole bunch of my friends sitting in the White House. And I said, that's amazing. That's incredible. Brandi Kruse, Jonathan Cho, Jack Posobiec, Savannah Hernandez, Katie Davenport, all these people I know, Cam Higbee, sitting there talking about Antifa with the President of the United States. Tell us what it was like in the room. Joining us now on the Warrior Injury Law studio line, none other than the host of the Undivided Podcast, the one and only Brandi Kruse. Brandi, tell us all about it.
Hello. Well, I have an hour and a half of sleep, and so that tells you a little bit about my day yesterday in D.C., but look, I would love to play it cool and be like, oh, no big deal, the White House. But no, I was totally geeking out. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And also to be there to talk about a subject that matters so much to me. I mean, you know that I've been covering Antifa for 15 years in Seattle, first as a mainstream journalist, radio reporter, TV reporter, and then as an independent, host of the show. And, to try for 15 years to get people to take seriously the threat that Antifa poses to our communities and indeed the crimes they carry out, and then to have the President of the United States recognize the threat, and invite so many of us there who've been in the trenches was really just an honor.
I think in the 4 minutes and 27 seconds you had in that video, which went uber viral, so much so that my phone, I forgot to put the buzzer off for the Jewish holiday. It's buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. I'm thinking, oh my God, what tragedy has happened? What's going on? Turns out it was just people sending me your video. So what happens is, in those 4 minutes and 27 seconds, you not only made your case, but you also destroyed the media, and you had the president agreeing and complimenting you. Tell us what it was like.
Yeah, well, it's, they told us we'd have 3 to 5 minutes each to speak. And, all of us went in there with, individual sort of mission and what we've been, covering. Like Katie Davenport talked about what's happening in Portland. She's been down there sort of entrenched in it. And what I wanted to get across is from my perspective, which was pretty unique in the room as a former television journalist who covered Antifa. Because there's this real, lie being spread by the mainstream news that all these are just right-wing agitators. It's only the conservatives getting assaulted, and that's just not true. When my crew was mobbed at CHOP in 2020, I was a mainstream journalist, and I've watched over the years many legacy reporters get assaulted by Antifa, and then it's just like they memory hole it. And so I really wanted to talk about that aspect of it and to make it clear to the press that was in the room, I'm not here to convince you that Antifa is real. I've given up. There's nothing I can say that will convince you. We're here to figure out what we're going to do in the next 3.5 years without your help to take down Antifa. And so, yeah, I had an opportunity to speak directly to the press corps, which many of the independent journalists and content creators in the room also took that opportunity. And I also, I asked a few people, I said, should I tell the president? Because I didn't find out that he was going to be there until a couple hours beforehand. We weren't given the detail that the president was going to be there. And then I found out, I'd asked a few people, should I tell him I used to have TDS, trauma derangement syndrome? And my producer, Nicole, my husband, I think everybody's like, don't do that. That's awkward. That's like going into someone's house and saying, I used to hate you. Don't do it. And I was like, I think I can do it in a way that's fun. Because one of the things that's changed for me about Trump is now I find him genuinely funny. I find him very entertaining, where I used to find him just, soul-suckingly cringeworthy. And so he has a great sense of humor. And so he came in the room and he was laughing and joking with us. And I said, no, I think I can tell him I had TDS. And I'm actually very glad that I did, because it ended up being a fun moment and just a fun exchange with the president.
Massive viral clip as well. That's the thing that everybody's clipping so much. So that was a great, great moment. And I got a question for you. You mentioned that all of you were told you're going to be given 3 to 5 minutes. A lot of you have overlapping. How'd you guys not conflict? Was there any coordination beforehand? Because I know you're friends with Katie. I know you're friends with Cho. I know you're friends with Cam. I know you're friends with Andy. No. Was there any discussion of, okay, I'm going to take this? Because Cho really made it about the homeless industrial complex angle. You made it about the media angle, and even though the other ones took pot shots at the media, yours was a direct indictment of the media.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit, not all of us, but I also think, none of us really had prepared remarks. Maybe a couple people did, and so, we were kind of, like what I ended up saying to the president, I hadn't planned much of it, except I knew I was going to talk about the media, and maybe if I had time, tell him about my TDS. And so I think we all just were passionate about trying to because we knew that going in there and just telling a bunch of stories about all the times we've been assaulted by Antifa wasn't really going to do anything, right? We all know this is happening. The question is, where do we go from here? And so we did have a little conversation about, Andy Ngo, for instance, who's kind of the grandfather of Antifa coverage. He, really wanted to talk about his journey at the very beginning and what, set it off and sort of the international aspect of Antifa. So, yeah, we did talk it out a little bit so we could make sure that we had the most effective use of the president's time as possible.
Did you get any one-on-one time with the president or with Kristi Noem or with Kash Patel? Because you had all of them and Pam Bondi in the room. Did they ask for any follow-up? Did they ask for your videos? Had they seen them already? Was there any prep in advance of send us your stuff?
So I'll tell you, this all came together very last minute. I believe it was Monday. Bald eagle landed on the roof of my house and dropped a note down the chimney from the White House and said, "Do you want to come to the White House?" I mean, it wasn't that. It was a text message, but same thing, right? And I was like, oh, gosh, let me check my schedule. Do I want to come to the White House? Of course. And then even then, they only told us it would be a roundtable of independent journalists and members of the administration. So we weren't given until the day of the fact that it would be Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Kristi Noem, and the President of the United States. And so we didn't really have time to do any, dumping of information on them. But they did ask specific follow-ups during, you probably heard about, oh, can I get that name? Can I get that information? Yeah. Can you send that to us? And I do know that some follow-up has already happened in that regard. We didn't have a lot of time with them after, I got a chance quick to shake the president's hand as he was leaving. And but because the other big news, this was, I think, the most honestly fascinating part of the whole thing to me, is the news that broke about the potential peace deal in the Middle East in the middle of this thing we were doing. And so they all left pretty quickly because they had to attend to that. But it was fascinating, Ari, and I know it's such a big, that you've been talking about in your show, but, we're sitting in there and the doors are open to the next room and there's a long hallway. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see the vice president of the United States pacing kind of outside on his phone. And then I see the Secretary of State, neither of whom are scheduled to be at our thing, and they're pacing in the hall. And I'm like, something is going on here. Something's up. And then the president spots Marco Rubio, and you probably heard him, call Marco Rubio in. And Marco's like, and the president's, do we have any updates on the Middle East? And he goes, well, Mr. President, that's what I want to talk to you about. But after all these people leave. And so this is happening in this real time, and he writes a note, he passes it to the president, and that's when the president read that they're very close to a deal, which was just a cool thing to watch happen.
Witnessing history in the room in the last couple of minutes we have with Brandi Kruse, host of the Undivided podcast, which you should sign up for. You should go watch it and hear her episode, especially today, where I'm sure she gives you a much longer, much more detailed version of this. So, Brandi, something to me, you just brought this up, the contrast between the end of the Israel-Hamas war, we hope, and what you guys were talking about. People say, well, Antifa is just an idea. And I say, why aren't we treating it like Hamas, various terrorist cells? Why aren't we treating it like Al-Qaeda? Was that even part of the discussion? Because we still go after Hamas and Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups through their finances. Is that something that's being discussed or investigated?
So specifically, Kash Patel said they're following the money, and they want to figure out where and I said on my show today, I guarantee that they follow some of the money back to some of these, and I don't know if it's money sent with the intent of criminal conduct occurring, probably not, but money that's propping up some of these radical groups. I guarantee you could follow it back to the teachers' unions and the Democratic Socialists of America. I mean, there's not a coincidence that so many of these Antifa types are public school teachers. It's not a coincidence that so many of these Antifa types belong to the Democratic Socialists of America. So they're following the money. They're trying to figure it out that way. And also, it is true that Antifa, as much as I hate to give the media any sort of credit, but when they say it's difficult to define Antifa, I agree with that. I do think it is. You can't just say you're a terrorist because you're dressed in all black. So it's not about prosecuting ideology or ideas. It's about prosecuting actions. So at the end of the day, if all the federal government does is they look for actions, that are happening, violent political extremism, and they prosecute those actions and then also run a subsequent investigation to see if anyone contributed to that conduct, planned it or funded it, then that's great. That will help with our mission.
Brandi, just before we let you go, what do you think about the local media coverage of this meeting? I saw certain articles were entertaining and I was giggling and yelling at the screen at the same time. What was your impression of the coverage of this event?
Gosh, I haven't read much of it. The only thing I saw was a Como News article that was fine. It basically was about how so many, we were there, Northwest journalists. They even mentioned Jonathan Cho, who they fired. So I thought it was funny they had to put him in, that they fired him and then he's there with the president. And I thought it was mostly, the Como one was mostly fair. There was maybe a line or two where I was like, okay. But I haven't read any others. So if you have some that you'd recommend, I, will read them later. I've been a little busy.
I would actually say the lack of coverage of this speaks so much that Como was one of the only ones I saw about this. The other one was some people tweeting about it, but nothing that was any great shakes. I will say the fact that they didn't cover it only underscored your point of the lack of media coverage. Brandi, in letting you go, I just want to say this. We just got this text in. This is from William. He put this in on the Warrior Injury Law text line. Hey, Ari, tell Brandi that Dory Monson is smiling down on her. You did an amazing job. You made us all so proud. You brought this issue to the forefront that us here in the Pacific Northwest have known for so long. I can't sum it up any better than what William said. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Oh, and thank you, William. That just makes me, I wish Dory was here because he would have just been so excited about the whole thing, and I wish he was here often, but thank you, Ari. I appreciate it. And I wish you would have been there. Gosh, we'll have to go back.
Yes, I agree, for sure. It seems like we can't coordinate our schedules with trips to the White House. Brandi Kruse.
I know.
Yeah,
Next
great
time.
job. Really incredible job of bringing this to the national forefront. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, always a pleasure.